Cleveland, a small, relatively unnoticed area in the northeast of England, is not known for its beauty or charm. Covering parts of Yorkshire, Durham, and Teesside, it sits tucked away along the coast. On paper, it might seem like any other region, but once you step into its streets, the story changes. The River Tees flows through the heart of the region, but unfortunately it's not the only thing coursing through Cleveland. Crime has taken hold here, and it's become something people have come to accept. Violence, drugs, theft, it's all part of daily life now. Walking down these streets, you can't help but feel the tension. People don't make eye contact anymore. Every corner feels like a potential danger zone. If you don't carry something to protect yourself, you're playing a dangerous game. For many, that means carrying a knife. It's become so normalized that you hardly think twice when you see someone with one. There are people who've carried knives for years, not because they want to use them, but because they feel they have no choice. They've been pushed into a corner. Take Hemlington Estate, for example, a place where crime finds you, not the other way around. Walking through it in broad daylight, you're bound to run into trouble. During my investigation, it didn't take long for me to see firsthand what people here have been dealing with. One guy, not even trying to hide what he was carrying, he said, "You've got to walk around with a knife just to keep yourself safe, man." And he wasn't exaggerating. He showed the blade he had tucked under his jacket. "I've used it plenty of times," he admitted. "Not proud of it. But I've had to." That's the reality for a lot of people here. They aren't necessarily looking for trouble, but trouble finds them. He went on to tell how he's been in countless situations where he's had to defend himself. He's been stabbed multiple times, but he's also been the one doing the stabbing. "About 20 people, give or take," he said, as if it was just another number. It's a cycle of violence, and once you're in it, it's hard to break free. But how did we get here? The statistics tell a grim story. According to the latest figures, the rate of recorded crime in Cleveland stands at 141.5 per thousand people. That means over 14% of the population here were victims of crime last year. It's a staggering number, especially when you compare it to the rest of the country. For context, Cleveland's crime rate is nearly 40% higher than London's metropolitan police area, and over 50% higher than the national average for England and Wales. And it's not just any crime. Cleveland has the highest rate of sexual offenses in the country, the second highest rate of knife crime, and the fourth worst rate for drug offenses. It's a grim trifecta that paints a picture of a region struggling to maintain any sense of safety or security. Every time people walk down the street, they can feel it in the air, the fear, the tension. People here have had to adapt to living in a constant state of alertness. The worst part is that crime has become part of the fabric of life here. It's not something people talk about in hushed tones anymore. It's discussed openly, as if it's just another part of daily existence. The stories you hear from locals would shock anyone from outside the area. One resident was telling about how they've been burgled multiple times to the point where they've lost count. Later he told me it was 9 times. Later I will tell you his story. "I've stopped keeping track," they said, shaking their head. "And the police? They don't care. You call them and they don't show up. You're on your own out here." It's not just random acts of violence either. There's an organized element to it. Drugs play a massive role in what's happening in Cleveland. Crack cocaine has taken over the streets. You can see the effects of it everywhere you look. The addiction, the desperation, it's all tied back to the drug trade that has taken root here. Kids as young as 14, 15, and 16 are smoking crack. You can spot them easily. Their faces are hollowed out, their eyes sunken, and they roam the streets like shadows of their former selves. These aren't just isolated cases either. This is becoming the norm. There are kids barely old enough to understand what's happening, caught up in the drug trade. Dealers use them to run drugs because they know the police are less likely to suspect them. That one guy told how he has kids running his drugs for him. He doesn't even need to get his hands dirty anymore. "They do the drop-offs," he said casually, as if talking about a delivery service. "It's shocking, but it's happening every day." It's not just the dealers who are dangerous, it's the environment that comes with it. One resident, who owns a phone shop on Parliament Road, told about how his shop has been burgled 9 times. Each time, he's had to put in more security measures. Now he's got razor wire CCTV and he takes his stock home with him every night. "I'm scared," he admitted. "One time, a guy stole a phone from me and then tried to sell it back to me 3 days later. He knew where I lived and threatened me not to go to the police." The brazenness of the criminals here is something I've never seen before. They don't hide what they're doing because they don't fear the consequences. Cleveland police have their hands full. With 14% fewer officers than they had in 2010, they're stretched thin. They can't be everywhere at once, and the criminals know that. The police force was put under special measures in 2019 for being inadequate in all areas. Even though they've made improvements, people here still don't feel safe. Walking through the streets, you can see the boarded-up houses, the graffiti scrawled across walls accusing people of being snitches. It's a hostile environment. Drug raids happen frequently, but as soon as one place is shut down, another pops up to replace it. Just a few days before I arrived, the police raided a property in Hartlepool and found 200,000 pounds worth of cannabis plants. It was one of the biggest busts they've had recently, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Living in Cleveland, you can't escape the drug trade. It's everywhere, and with drugs comes violence. Knife crime is rampant here. In some places it's a daily occurrence. You hear about stabbings so often that it almost becomes background noise. But the reality is that every stabbing leaves a scar on this community. People are dying, lives are being ruined, and the violence shows no signs of stopping. This is a man who knows the reality of knife crime all too well. 2 years ago, he was attacked by 3 men. They came to his door with knives, ready to kill. He fought back, but it wasn't enough. He was stabbed multiple times, once in the back, once in the leg, and several more times as he tried to defend himself. He told me how he thought he was going to die that night. I thought, "This is it, I'm done," he said. I just covered myself up and hoped they'd stop. Gary survived, but the physical and emotional scars are still fresh. He walks with a limp now, a constant reminder of that night. What's even more heartbreaking is that Gary's 14-year-old son has been caught carrying a knife. When he asked him why, his response was simple. Because everyone else is. That's the mentality here now. Kids carry knives because they know they need them to protect themselves. It's a vicious cycle. If you don't carry a knife, you're vulnerable. But if you do, you're contributing to the problem. There's no easy way out. Another story is from Barbara, who knows the pain of knife crime better than most. Her son Robert was murdered in 2003. He was stabbed with a samurai sword just meters from their home. The weapon went through his heart, severing his aorta. He bled out in the street before help could arrive. Barbara has spent the last 20 years campaigning for change, trying to make sure no other mother has to go through what she did. But the pain never goes away. She told me there's no such thing as closure. People talk about closure like it's something you can just get, she said. But how do you get closure when your child is gone forever? The scale of the problem in Cleveland is overwhelming. Drugs, violence, theft, it's all connected. And at the heart of it is a community that feels abandoned. People here don't trust the police anymore. They don't believe things will get better. The sense of hopelessness is palpable. When you ask people what needs to change, they shrug. What can we do? They ask. The problem is too big. The numbers back up what they're saying. Despite efforts to crack down on crime, the statistics are still alarming. Theft offenses account for the second biggest crime group in Cleveland, with shoplifting being the worst in the entire country. Over the last 2 years, shoplifting offenses in the Northeast have risen by 33%, and Cleveland is at the center of it. Some shops have had to install panic alarms to protect their staff, but even that doesn't stop the thieves. They're desperate, driven by addiction, and they'll do anything to get what they need. It's not just adults either. There are kids as young as 12 years old involved in the drug trade. They're being used by older dealers to run drugs because they're less likely to be stopped by the police. It's terrifying to think that children are being drawn into this world at such a young age, but it's happening, and it's happening often. You walk through certain parts of Cleveland and you can almost sense it. These kids are growing up in an environment where crime is the norm, and it's shaping their future. But amidst all this chaos, there are people trying to make a difference. Paul Harris and Davy Leopard, 2 lifelong residents of Grove Hill Estate, have dedicated their lives to helping the next generation avoid the mistakes of the past. They started the You Can Project, a safe space for kids to come after school. It's a place where they can play football, video games, or just hang out without worrying about what's happening on the streets. The project has been a lifeline for so many kids. This is the center, and this is how much it means to them. One young boy, Alfie, told how he loves coming here because it keeps him off the streets. His mom, Dawn, volunteers at the project every week, cooking hot meals and running arts and crafts sessions for the kids. But with the local council facing bankruptcy, the future of the project is uncertain. If it shuts down, the kids will have nowhere to go, and the streets will be waiting for them. Dawn told how much she worries about her son's future. If this place closes, I don't know what we'll do, she said. I can't let him out on the streets, it's too dangerous. But if there's nowhere safe for him to go, what choice do we have? That's the sad reality of life in Cleveland. Choices are limited. The options for a better life are shrinking, and more people are being pulled into the cycle of crime. Drugs, violence, theft. It's all part of the same problem, and it's not going away anytime soon. What do you think needs to happen? Please let us know in the comments, and as always, this was the Criminal Network, and stay tuned for the next one, and please stay safe.